Hi, I'm Father Michael Orsi. I'm your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program that brings you the big G, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the little g, all the good things that people are doing to put the gospel of life into action. You know, during this coronavirus, COVID-19 episode that we're going through as a country, and as a matter of fact, around the world, we're hearing a lot of people say, follow the science, follow the science. Well, guess what? In the pro-life movement, we follow the science. And we have today someone who knows a lot about science, the science of babies and their mommies, and she is an OB-GYN, obstetrician, gynecologist. Her name is Dr. Christina Francis, and Dr. Francis is on the board of, first of all, the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, AAPLOG. How do you like that? AAPLOG, American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and she also serves as a board member of Right to Life in Indiana. I think you're the president of AAPLOG, aren't you?
I'm the chair of the board, yes.
Chairman of the board, okay. So we have a real live doctor, MD.
Yes.
And she knows the science. Now, the first thing I have to ask you is this. Did you become a doctor because you were pro-life? Or were you already pro-life and then you became a doctor?
That's a great question, and actually something that nobody's ever asked me before. So I'm excited to
See,
answer that.
I'm just a genius. I'm just a genius.
That's right. So I actually grew up in a Christian home, and growing up, we talked about the abortion issue sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes we would talk about it, and understood that every human life has value and worth, and because of that is deserving of protection. So I always called myself pro-life. That's not necessarily what led me into medicine, but I've been very thankful to have been in the field of medicine in this pro-life work that I'm doing through AAPLOG. So, and the more I studied as I got into medical school and learned about human embryology, even in my first year of medical school, and just the wonder of how conception occurs and how human development begins right at that moment of conception. And every single textbook that I looked at in medical school just confirmed for me the pro-life position that we are human beings from the moment of fertilization. And because of that, we should have the same rights from that moment forward that any born human being does.
So you're also concerned about human rights, and we're going to talk about that a little later on in the program. But when you went to medical school, University of Indiana, am I correct?
Indiana University, Yeah.
Okay, Indiana University. You went to medical school. Were there any requirements that you participate in an abortion?
So thankfully, when I was in medical school, we were not required. So on our OB rotation, it was known that there was the option of rotating with the local abortionist if you were interested in that. But it was not a requirement. So it was more of an opt-in sort of thing in our OB-GYN elective. And I'll have to tell you, I never heard of anybody, at least in my class, that opted into that. It just wasn't something that anyone was really interested in doing or observing. I think for obvious reasons, that's not why we go into medicine. So, however, we are hearing more and more reports from all over the country from medical students and residents that there has been what some might consider a subtle shift, but we at AAPLOG consider it a very significant shift from abortion being an opt-in part of an OBGYN rotation to being an opt-out part of an OBGYN rotation. So now the burden falls upon that student or that resident to say, hey, I'm not okay with this. I don't want to go and do that. And they have to speak up and say that, potentially in an environment where that's not the most kosher thing to say. We certainly have heard from people that they feel pressure that if they opt out, maybe they might get a lower grade on that rotation, or they might be given more work to do because they're deciding not to go and participate in that. And so it's a very significant shift towards making people in medical training feel that they are actually part of the minority or on the outside if they're deciding not to participate in this horrific thing that shouldn't be a part of medicine in the first place.
You go to school, you learn anatomy, you learn chemistry, you learn all the things that are necessary to preserve life. And some schools are saying now, well, you'd have to, we're presuming that you're going to be doing abortions, and if you don't want to do an abortion, you have to opt out. I'm sure there's some pressure on some of the doctors too, in training, that they might feel, well, maybe I won't get a good grade, maybe I should learn how to do this. I don't know.
I think it's important to note that more than 85% of OBGYNs actually do not perform abortions. And so that speaks to one of AAPLOG's main messages that we want to get out there to not only other medical providers, but also to the public. And that is that abortion is not healthcare. So we were practicing excellent healthcare at the hospital where I did my residency, but that did not require us to do elective abortions. And again, I think that's evidenced by the fact that more than 85% of OBGYNs never do abortions. If it was such an essential part of women's healthcare, then you would see nearly 100% of OBGYNs performing abortions, just like they would
but
Planned
Parenthood says this is part of women's healthcare. Ha,
right.
ha, ha. I heard some places have podiatrists performing abortions saying that they're medical doctors. I mean, this is part of the big lie. This is part of the big lie. Okay, now you get, you're doing your residency and then you go into practice. Mm-hmm. And like in your head, were you thinking, I'm going into practice now and I'm going to be a pro-life OB-GYN? How did you come to that? Like, this is what I want to do, and I want to bring other people, other doctors on board with this idea.
Sure. So, I think if any, especially OBGYN or any other women's healthcare provider, was really honest with themselves, they would acknowledge that we go into this field largely because of taking care of pregnant women. I mean, most people will tell you that that is one of the biggest joys of their practice, is taking care of pregnant women. And it presents a unique opportunity that we have, I think, apart from any other specialty, of taking care of two patients at once. And a lot of what
I never thought of that. That's great. Yeah, I like that. Two patients. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
We take care of two patients at once, and our job is to maximize the health of both of those patients. So, throughout your training, even if you're not being trained explicitly as a pro-life physician, you are being taught pro-life principles, and that you're being taught that you have two patients. You have this preborn patient and you have the maternal patient, and your job is to take care of both of them. So that's really present throughout training. But really what solidified for me the fact that I wanted to focus more on speaking the pro-life message, especially to other physicians, was actually, if you have time for me to share a brief story.
Yeah, please.
A very close dear friend was activated to do more for the pro-life movement during a 40 Days for Life event at her church. And so she just started educating herself more, challenged herself to watch things about abortion, things like that. And she contacted me one day, and I've always said ever since this that everyone should have a friend like this in their lives. But she contacted me one day and she said, Christina, you're a woman, you're an OBGYN, and you say that you're pro-life, but what are you really doing to save these preborn children? I think that you could be doing more. And I realized that she was right. I spoke with my patients from a pro-life perspective, things like that. But what was I really doing to get the message out there that abortion harms women and that it ends the life of innocent preborn children? And so she just really challenged me in that. And I actually at the time was planning on returning to Kenya, where I'd been a medical missionary, and that was my plan for the rest of my life, was to do that. But then I realized, that there really is a life and death battle that's going on, not only in this country, but around the world as women and the public are being sold lies by the abortion industry that this is healthcare, that this is good for women, when in fact we know that it's actually very harmful for women. And the fact that it's ending millions of preborn lives every year across the globe. And so I just really felt like, okay, she's right. I'm an OB-GYN. I have a unique perspective on this. And so I could really speak to this. And so that's when I got involved with
So
AAPLOG.
a woman comes to you, okay, did this ever happen where a woman comes to you and says to you, well, I don't know if I want to have this child. Or one of these tests says that, well, the child has Down syndrome or some kind of genetic defect. And you are there as a pro-life doctor. How do you talk to them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's certainly a scenario that I have been in many times. And, in both of those scenarios, I have a hurting, potentially grieving woman that's sitting in front of me, whether it's a young girl who's found herself in an unplanned pregnancy. Maybe she's being pressured by people around her to just kind of take the quote unquote easy way out through getting an abortion, or a woman or a couple that have found themselves being faced with what we would call an adverse prenatal diagnosis. So, a diagnosis that something's wrong with their preborn child. In both of those scenarios, my first response to her is compassion. I absolutely understand that she is finding herself in a situation where maybe she never imagined herself and she's really unsure as to what to do. Usually my first question to her, especially in the scenario of an unplanned pregnancy, is, why is it that you feel that abortion is going to be the best option for you? Because oftentimes, if you just sit down and actually talk to the woman, you find out a lot of information. Either she just feels like she doesn't have the support that she needs or resources that she needs, or maybe someone in her life is pressuring her. I think regardless of where someone stands on abortion, they should agree that a woman should never make that decision under duress or under pressure, that is not okay, or simply because she lacks physical resources. That we know that there are so many people within the pro-life movement who are ready and willing and standing there with resources to help these women not only continue their pregnancies, but beyond that.
So they come to
the
you.
same sort of scenario if they're facing an adverse diagnosis as well. It's just talking through that with them.
So they come to you, and I guess they're not expecting that, are they? I mean, they must be saying, what did I walk into here? This doctor is, telling me things that I thought maybe my pastor might say to me, or my priest or my rabbi, but this doctor is actually giving witness to the truth, first of all, of the sanctity of life, but also you're talking about science, and I can tell that obviously you are dealing also on a psychological level. You kind of know what's going on in that lady's head.
Right. Yeah, well, and I am a religious person, but, my religion doesn't even necessarily need to enter into that conversation in the exam room, because like you said, I'm speaking to her of scientific and medical truths. The fact that we know that this is a living human being, a distinct living human being inside of her that's growing. And so I think just talking to her about that, this is your child, this is a human being who deserves protection just like any other child. But also talking to her about the very real harms that we know exist for women with abortions, that it's not an easy answer for many reasons. And you're right. I think a lot of physicians are afraid to give that information, even if they know it, to their patient, because one thing that was stressed over and over, throughout my medical training, and I know this isn't unique to me, is that physicians are supposed to be very unbiased in their counseling. So you just have to kind of lay the options out there and not allow your own kind of convictions or whatever to play into that. However, the only thing that we really kind of stick to it black and white in the medical profession is abortion. So if a woman comes to me and she needs to be on a blood pressure medicine, and I lay out to her, okay, here's 20 different options for you for a blood pressure medication, the very first thing she's going to say to me is, okay, but which one of those things do you think is the best for me with my health history, all of that? So, my medical expertise is going to play into that. That's the very very same thing I do with women who are considering abortion is I talk to them about, here are the harms that are associated with abortion, and here's why I don't think that that's a good option for you.
That's fantastic.
So,
You said you're certainly a Christian and you don't have to necessarily bring religion into the conversation. Do you ever bring religion into the conversation? Do you ever give testimony, or do you know maybe something about the person that you could tap into the Holy Spirit in them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the fact that we are whole persons. And so we can't necessarily separate our religious beliefs and convictions apart from who we are as a whole person. And so that definitely plays into it. Certainly when we start talking about the worth of human beings, a lot of our beliefs about the inherent worth of the value of human beings comes from the fact that we're created in the image of God. So that certainly plays into it. As well as there have been many times, not just when we're talking about abortion, but times when I've had to give patients an adverse diagnosis, or they have to make a really hard decision, or they're facing a health crisis, where I've asked permission to pray with them. And I've only in my entire career ever had one patient who said that she didn't feel comfortable with that. And I said, okay, that was fine. I'm not going to force that on you. But I know that I've had patients of varying faith backgrounds who appreciated the fact that I was willing to pray with them and acknowledge that there are parts of medicine that are above us and beyond our hands as human beings to be able to accomplish.
As you can imagine, producing this wonderful program, Action for Life, it costs a great deal of money. We're going to need your help. So if you would like to donate to keep this good news program on the air, please go to your computer, your cell phone, actionforlife.net. Thought for the day. I hope that all of you belong to a Christian community. Going to church is extremely important. Why? Because we need the support of other people in order for us to live a good Christian life. Christianity is a community religion. Please worship in your church this weekend. I think a lot of doctors might think, well, I'm kind of out of my league. It's above my pay grade, so to speak, for me to bring religion and prayer into their practice. Yet I have found some doctors who do it very, very well. They ask their patients if they could pray with them. I went to one doctor's office and he had prayer cards in his waiting room. I think it makes a difference, and I think that doctors, and you certainly do, you see your profession as a ministry, and that's the biggest difference in the whole world. I'd prefer to have a doctor that sees his or her practice as a ministry than one who's simply saying to me, these are the facts, black and white, because as you said, we're holistic people, mind, body, and spirit. Now, what I'm also interested in is this. Right? You're doing a beautiful job, with your practice. You're talking to women when they come in with their pregnancies, and you tell me it's not one patient, it's two patients you're taking care of. Well, anyway, how did this, blossom your vision to this AAPLOG? How did AAPLOG happen?
Sure. So AAPLOG is a professional medical organization of healthcare practitioners who desire to practice really according to the original Hippocratic tradition. So where we will first cause no harm to our patients. And actually the original Hippocratic Oath expressly forbids abortion. And so
yes, folks, I want to tell the folks, The Hippocratic Oath was very precise in saying not to perform an abortion. That's the Hippocratic Oath. I believe that it has been altered somewhat. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes. So there are now new permutations of the Hippocratic Oath, which unfortunately are being given to doctors as they enter practice that don't include that. But yes, if you go back to the original Hippocratic Oath, it expressly forbid ending your patient's life or performing an abortion. So we are a group of physicians who desire to practice according to those principles. We actually started out as a special interest group within the American College of OB-GYNs, which is kind of seen as the leading medical organization for OB-GYNs in the US. And back around 1973, around the time that Roe v. Wade was put into effect, a large majority.
Perpetrated.
Yes.
There you go.
That's
I learned
true.
that. I learned that in law school.
That's a good way of saying it. That's right.
I mean, you're very impressed by me. Behooves. I learned that from Shakespeare. Perpetrated. I learned that in law school.
There you go. That's
if we keep going, you're going to find out how much less I know.
Well, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it really was perpetrated on the American population and as well as physicians. So there was a large portion of ACOG membership who did not agree with the way that ACOG was moving, which was moving towards being very supportive of abortion, when really in the past they had been a little bit more against it, or at the very least, very neutral on the subject. And so this group of physicians who opposed abortion becoming a part of healthcare formed this special interest group of pro-life physicians within ACOG. And we quickly became the largest special interest group within ACOG. And continued to be such until ACOG disbanded all special interest groups, which occurred around 2012. And so then at that point, then AAPLOG, we became our own organization. So we have been around since 2012 as our own distinct organization, representing, again, women's healthcare providers who desire to practice this way in medicine, who desire to practice from a pro-life standpoint.
So you gather like-minded physicians and you support each other.
Exactly.
Information, meetings, any kind of prayer meetings take place with the doctors. They get together and say, hey, let's pray over this. What do you do at these meetings? Just share science, share experiences? What do you do?
So we certainly have members within our organization that are religious, and so I'm sure that they're getting together on their own to pray. We as an organization are not a religious organization. We're a professional organization. So we welcome people of any faith or people of no faith whatsoever. In fact, we've done some partnerships with groups like Atheists for Life because we all share a common vision that life is valuable from the moment of conception. So, but yes, we do have people within our organization that are religious, but we exist to help the public and others in medicine understand the science that backs up the pro-life movement. So the science of the fact that human life begins at the moment of conception, and also the increasing body of evidence out there about the harms that abortion poses to women as well.
You know, I like when you're talking about you even have atheists. And a lot of people think, well, you know, being pro-life means that you're Catholic or you're a Christian. And well, the Hippocratic Oath, Hippocrates was not a Christian.
Right.
He was a pagan, I guess. I don't know what religion he was, but he wasn't a Christian, and he wasn't Jewish, and he wasn't raised on the Bible, but he knew. Common sense, reason tells us that killing an unborn child is murder. It's wrong. Now, I have so much to talk to you about, but I'm also fascinated. You've done traveling around the world practically, Kenya, Burma. Tell me about that, all your travels, and why.
Sure. So when I started medical school, actually during undergrad, I started doing some traveling internationally, doing missions trips, and just fell in love with experiencing other cultures and living in other cultures, as well as seeing the need that existed in the developing world. And that really motivated me then to go to medical school for the purpose of helping in the developing world. And I didn't envision myself doing OB-GYN actually initially. But the more traveling I did and the more I experienced in medical school, I realized that in most developing countries, the populations with the highest medical needs are women and children. And so OB-GYN was just kind of a natural fit for that. And so I spent 3 years working at a mission hospital in Kenya. And like I said before, my original plan was that was what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I never in a million years thought I'd be living back in the United States again. But
really?
It was,
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I would have told you were crazy if you told me 10 years ago I'd be living back in the States. So, but it really was the need that I saw in defending not only preborn children from the ravages of abortion, but again, defending women from just these lies that they are being told and the manipulations that they're being put through, that abortion is good for them, that drew me back to the US. So I still go back to Kenya typically once a year to work at the mission hospital where I worked before. Of course, this year didn't go because of COVID, but yeah, so I still have connections there. It's still a big part of my heart, as I'm sure anybody who's watching, who's ever traveled to Africa will know that once you go, it's hard to not go back. It's a really amazing place. And I miss my Kenyan friends dearly and long for the day that I can be back with them again. But they understood when I left that I was leaving to pursue, I think a higher purpose in trying to speak up for the voiceless. So
God bless you. Doctor, I'm very much inspired by you and what you do and how you minister to your patients, both of them, and then to give you time and your talent to go to foreign countries, Kenya, Africa, Burma, spend so much time there because of your commitment to life. But you're there from the very beginning, and it's conception until natural death. And what you're doing is amazing work. It is God's work. And God bless you, doctor. Keep up your good work. I end this program by saying, I'm for action, and I know you are too. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. We would like to thank our generous sponsors for their wonderful support. Thanks for watching. Please join us next time for Action for Life. I'm for action, and I hope you are too. I'm Father Michael Orsi. I am your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program which talks about the gospel of Jesus Christ, the big G and the little g, all the good things that people are doing to put the gospel of life into action. So please join us for the next episode of Action for Life.